Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the U.E.'s Valkyrie. It was one of humanity's newest and strongest warships. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers and the gentle vibration of the engines. Jake liked these peaceful moments. They didn't happen often in space. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at her station, watching the communication screens. She had been doing this job for 3 years, and most days were boring. Ships talked to each other about supplies and course changes. Nothing exciting ever happened. Then everything changed. A weak signal came through the quantum relay network. Amy frowned and adjusted her controls. The signal was very faint, like someone whispering from very far away. It was coming from a place called the Kepler sector. Amy had never heard of it before. "Commander," Amy called out, "I'm getting something strange here." Jake walked over to her station. He was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. He had been in space for 20 years and had seen many things. But the look on Amy's face told him this was different. "What do you have?" Jake asked. Amy worked on her controls, trying to make the signal clearer. Slowly, a voice came through the speakers. It was definitely not human. The voice was higher, and had strange sounds that human voices couldn't make. But it was speaking Galactic Standard, the language that different alien species used to talk to each other. "Please ... anyone, the Vorthan Empire. They came without warning ... our colonies. Millions dead ... children. Please help us ... The voice was full of pain and fear. Even though it was alien, Jake could hear the desperation. Someone was dying out there, and they were asking for help. Amy's hands shook as she worked to get more of the message. "There's more, sir. They're sending data." Pictures appeared on the screen. Jake had seen war before, but these images made his stomach turn. Cities were burning. Ships full of people were being destroyed in space. Aliens who looked peaceful and harmless were being forced into camps by soldiers in dark armor. The aliens sending the message called themselves the Nalari. Their message said they were explorers and scientists. They had never hurt anyone, but something called the Vorthan Empire had attacked them without warning. The Vorthans were killing everyone, men, women, and children. "Get me Admiral Harper," Jake said. His voice was hard now. Within minutes, Admiral Lisa Harper appeared on the main screen. She was on her flagship, the U.E.'s Thunder. Harper was known throughout the human fleet as someone who never backed down from a fight. She had short black hair and eyes that could cut through steel. "What do you have for me, Commander?" Harper asked. Jake sent her the data. Harper watched the images in silence. Her face didn't change, but Jake could see her hands tighten on her chair. "How far away is this Kepler sector?" Harper asked. 2 months through hyperspace, Admiral. It's beyond any place we've ever been." Harper called a meeting with all her ship captains. Within an hour, 27 captains were on the screen. Some were excited about the chance for action. Others were worried. Captain Alex Turner spoke first. He commanded a heavy cruiser called the Thunderstrike. "Admiral, this isn't our fight. We barely have enough ships to protect our own worlds. Why should we risk our people for aliens we've never met?" Other captains agreed. Earth had its own problems. The human colonies needed protection. Going so far from home was dangerous. But Harper had already decided. She stood up and looked at each captain on the screen. 5 years ago, we met other species for the first time, she said. We learned we weren't alone in the universe. We also learned that some species are good and some are evil. The Nalari are asking for our help. They're being murdered by the millions. Harper walked closer to the camera. I've read human history. I know what happens when good people do nothing, while evil people kill innocents. We swore that would never happen again, while humans had the power to stop it. Captain Alex Turner tried to argue again. But Admiral, we don't know anything about these Vorthins. They might be too strong for us. Harper smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Then there. About to learn something about humans. We don't care how strong our enemies are when innocents are being killed. The vote was close, but Harper got her way. The Third Fleet would go to the Kepler sector. 27 ships would make the longest journey in human military history. They would be completely alone, with no way to call for help. Jake felt excited and scared at the same time. This could be humanity's first real war with aliens. They might all die far from home. But he knew Harper was right. The Nalari needed help, and humans didn't abandon people who were in trouble. As the fleet prepared to leave, Harper sent a message to all ships. We go not as conquerors, but as rescuers. The galaxy is about to learn what happens when you hurt innocent people while humans are watching. Jake looked at the stars through the bridge window. Somewhere out there, people were dying and asking for help. The human fleet was coming, and they brought the fury of Earth with them. The Vorthins had no idea what was heading their way. 2 months later, the human fleet came out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler sector. What they saw made everyone angry and sick. There was nothing but death everywhere they looked. Commander Steve Clark was Admiral Harper's intelligence officer. He was good at reading the signs that battles left behind. His job was to figure out what had happened by looking at the wreckage floating in space. Admiral, Steve said over the communication system, I'm seeing debris from at least 50 ships. These were civilian vessels, cargo haulers, passenger ships, even medical transports. Jake Morrison looked at his screens from the bridge of the Valkyrie. Pieces of metal drifted through space like a graveyard. Some pieces still had writing on them in the Nalari language. These had been homes, schools, and hospitals before Thans destroyed them. Any survivors? Admiral Harper asked. None. That we can detect, Steve replied. But I'm seeing something else. The attack patterns show the Vorthins were very organized. They hit the power stations first, then the communication centers, then the civilian areas. This wasn't just war. This was planned murder. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos was listening from her ship, the Reaper. She commanded a destroyer that was built for stealth and quick attacks. Maria was small but fierce, and she hated bullies more than anything else in the universe. Admiral, request permission to scout ahead, Maria said. My ship is the fastest and hardest to see. Harper agreed. The Reaper moved deeper into Nalari space, invisible to most sensors. Maria and her crew were like ghosts, watching and learning about their enemies. 3 days later, Maria found something that made her blood boil. Admiral, you need to see this, Maria said. Her voice was tight with anger. The images she sent back showed a Vorthin squadron herding refugee ships toward a dark space station. The alien ships were huge and black, with weapons that glowed red. They looked like metal sharks swimming through space, but it was the refugee ships that broke everyone's hearts. They were small, damaged, and packed with Nalari families trying to escape. Parents held their children close as the Vorthin ships forced them toward the station. What's on that station? Harper asked. Maria had scanned it with her best equipment. It's some kind of processing facility, Admiral. I'm detecting medical equipment, but not the kind used for healing. They're doing experiments on these people? Harper's face turned to stone. She had read about places like this in human history books. Places where evil people did terrible things to innocent victims. All ships, this is Admiral Harper, she said on the fleet communication channel. We have civilians in immediate danger. Maria, you have permission to engage. Maria smiled for the first time in days. Understood, Admiral. Beginning attack run. The Reaper decloaked right behind the Vorthin squadron. The aliens had never seen human technology before. They didn't understand what was happening until it was too late. Maria's ship opened fire with kinetic railguns. These weapons shot pieces of metal so fast they became like tiny meteors. The Vorthons had energy shields, but the shields were designed to stop lasers and plasma bolts. They couldn't stop solid metal moving at incredible speed. The first Vorthon ship exploded when the railgun shots punched completely through it. The second ship tried to turn and fight back, but another burst of fire tore it apart. The third ship started to run away, but Maria was faster. In less than 5 minutes, 3 Vorthon ships were destroyed. The refugee ships were free. Maria opened a communication channel to the Nalari ships. She had learned some of their language during the long trip to their sector. "This is the human ship Reaper," she said. "You are safe now. Follow us to safety." The response came back in broken galactic standard. "Humans? We ... We sent message for help. You came? You really came?" "Yes," Maria said. "We came. And we're going to make the Vorthons pay for what they've done." The rescue operation brought back survivors, but it also brought back intelligence. Commander Pete Williams was the fleet's expert on alien biology. He studied the rescued Nalari and interviewed them about their captors. What he learned made everyone in the fleet furious. "The Vorthons aren't just killing the Nalari," Pete reported to Admiral Harper. "They're using them for medical experiments. They want to learn how different species work so they can find better ways to kill them." Harper slammed her fist on her desk. "They're treating intelligent beings like laboratory animals." "It's worse than that," Pete continued. "From what the survivors told me, the Vorthons have done this to other species too. Lots of other species. They think they're the only ones who deserve to live." The news spread through the human fleet like wildfire. Every sailor, every marine, every pilot became angry. Humans had their own dark history, but they had learned from their mistakes. They had promised themselves that genocide would never happen again if they could stop it. But the Vorthons were learning too. They realized the humans were different from other species they had fought. Human weapons were strange and powerful. Human tactics didn't follow the usual rules of space warfare. Captain Roy Chun found this out when his ship, the Wolverine, ran into a Vorthon patrol. Roy was trapped with 12 enemy ships surrounding him. The normal thing to do would be to surrender or try to run away. Roy did neither. "All hands, brace for impact," he announced to his crew. "We're going to show these aliens how humans fight." Instead of surrendering, Roy pointed his ship directly at the biggest Vorthon vessel and pushed his engines to maximum power. The Wolverine was built to survive in Earth's harsh environment. It was tough and heavy, like a flying mountain. The Vorthon captain couldn't believe what he was seeing. No species had ever used ramming as a battle tactic. It was crazy and suicidal, but it worked. The Wolverine smashed into the Vorthon flagship like a meteor hitting a planet. Both ships were destroyed, but the explosion scattered the other Vorthon vessels and allowed a human rescue ship to escape with important intelligence data. Roy Chun and his crew died in the collision, but their sacrifice saved hundreds of lives and sent a message to every Vorthon in the sector. Humans didn't fight like anyone else. They fought with a fury that scared even hardened warriors. Admiral Harper held a memorial service for Roy and his crew. As she looked at the faces of her remaining captains, she could see they were all thinking the same thing. The Vorthons had started this war by murdering innocents. Now they were going to learn what happened when they made humans angry. Captain Lucy Park had been gone for 2 weeks on a dangerous mission. She commanded a small, fast ship called the Scout. Her job was to sneak deep into Vorthon space and find their main fleet. When she came back, the news she brought made everyone worried. "Admiral," Lucy said as she stood in the briefing room, "I found them. The Vorthon main fleet is gathering near their homeworld. I counted over 300 ships. Admiral Harper looked at the pictures Lucy had taken. The Vorthen fleet was massive. Their ships were bigger than human vessels, and they had weapons that could destroy planets. What are they planning? Harper asked. From what I could observe, they're preparing for a final attack on the last free Nalari worlds, Lucy replied. They want to finish what they started. Complete genocide. Commander Nick Davis was Harper's tactical advisor. He was young, but very smart about space battles. Nick studied the images carefully. Admiral, I think I see something, Nick said. Look at how their ships are arranged. They're all connected to these big command vessels in the center. Harper looked where Nick was pointing. The Vorthen fleet was organized like a spider web, with huge ships in the middle, controlling all the others. Their entire fleet coordination depends on those command ships, Nick continued. If we could destroy them all at the same time, their fleet would fall apart. Captain Alex Turner shook his head. Even if that works, we're still outnumbered more than 10 to 1. We'd need a miracle weapon to take out that many targets at once. Harper was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to her weapons officer, Colonel Janet Price. Janet, how many nuclear warheads do we have? Janet checked her tablet. 237, Admiral. Various sizes from tactical to strategic. The room went silent. Nuclear weapons were humanity's oldest and most terrible invention. They had been banned from use in human space for over a century. But out here, so far from Earth, different rules applied. The Vorthens have never seen fusion weapons, Harper said slowly. Their technology is all based on clean energy. They won't have defenses against radiation or electromagnetic pulses. Nick understood immediately. We could use nuclear torpedoes to target their command ships. If we hit them all at exactly the same time, their fleet coordination would collapse. Harper finished. But we'd need to get close enough to launch, and we'd need perfect timing. Janet Price had been listening carefully. She was one of the best pilots in the human fleet, and she had commanded bombing missions before. But this would be different from anything she had ever done. Admiral, I can do it, Janet said. Give me the fastest fighters and the biggest warheads. My squadron can get through their defenses. Harper looked around the room at her officers. They all knew this was probably a suicide mission. The Vorthen fleet was too big and too well defended. Most of the human pilots would not come back. I need volunteers only, Harper said. No one has to do this. Every pilot in the fleet volunteered. 3 days later, Janet Price led 24 fighters toward the Vorthen fleet. Each fighter carried 2 nuclear torpedoes. The weapons were small, but incredibly powerful, each one containing the compressed fury of a star. The fighters were tiny compared to the massive Vorthen battleships. From a distance, they looked like insects flying toward giants. But Janet and her pilots were not afraid. They had trained for this moment their entire careers. Remember, Janet said over the radio, we hit the command ships at exactly the same time. Wait for my signal. The Vorthen fleet detected the incoming fighters. When they were still far away, hundreds of defensive weapons began firing. Energy beams and plasma bolts filled space with deadly light. The first human fighter was destroyed within minutes. Then another. Janet watched her friends die, but kept flying forward. The mission was more important than any individual life. Stay. On target, she ordered. Don't let them die for nothing. More fighters were destroyed as they got closer to the enemy fleet. The Vorthen ships were so big that their weapons could reach across incredible distances. But the human fighters were fast and hard to hit. Janet's fighter was damaged by a near miss. Her right engine was failing, and her life support was making strange noises. But she could see her target now, a massive Vorthen command ship that looked like a floating city. All units, this is Janet, she said over the radio. I have visual on target. preparing to launch. Around her, the surviving fighters were also getting close to their targets. Janet could see the fear in the Vorthen. Fleet, no. Their ships were turning and trying to run away, but it was too late. Launch torpedoes! Janet shouted. 20-4 nuclear weapons flew through space toward the Vorthen command ships. The torpedoes were guided by the most advanced computers humanity had ever built. Nothing would stop them from reaching their targets. Janet watched. Her torpedo fly straight into the heart of the command ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to catch fire. The nuclear explosion was like a miniature sun being born. The command ship simply vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. All around the fleet, other command ships were exploding as the torpedoes found their marks. The electromagnetic pulse from the explosion spread out like invisible lightning. Vorthen ships that weren't destroyed by the blasts found their computers. And communication systems failing. Orders couldn't be sent or received. The carefully organized fleet became a confused mob. Janet tried to fly her damaged fighter back to the human fleet, but her engines finally failed. She ejected in an escape pod and watched as the Vorthen fleet fell apart in front of her eyes. Ships collided with each other in the confusion. Some Vorthen vessels tried to regroup, but without their command ships, they couldn't coordinate their movements. The mighty fleet that had terrorized the galaxy was now helpless. Admiral Harper watched the battle from her flagship. When she saw the nuclear explosions, she felt proud and sad at the same time. The mission had worked perfectly, but more than half of Janet's pilots had died to make it happen. Admiral, her communication officer reported, "We are receiving a transmission from the surviving Vorthen ships." "Put it on screen," Harper ordered. A Vorthen officer appeared, his face showing fear and confusion. "Human fleet, this is Commander Vex of the Vorthen Navy. We request immediate ceasefire. We are prepared to negotiate terms." Harper stood up and walked closer to the screen. Her voice was cold as ice. "There will be no negotiation with murderers," she said. "You started this war by killing innocent people. You chose genocide as your weapon. Now you face the consequences." The Vorthen officer tried to speak again, but Harper cut the transmission. "All ships," she announced to her fleet, "prepare for final assault. We finish this at their homeworld." The surviving Vorthen ships tried to flee, but the human fleet followed them. The hunters had become the hunted, and there would be no mercy for those who had shown none to others. Deep in space, Janet Price's escape pod was picked up by a human rescue ship. She was hurt but alive, and she had helped deliver the most decisive victory in human military history. The galaxy was about to learn that humans kept their promises, especially the ones about protecting the innocent. The human fleet arrived at the Vorthen homeworld to find the biggest battle fortress they had ever seen. Admiral Harper stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking at the tactical displays. The Vorthen home system was protected by thousands of defense platforms, energy shields that covered the entire planet, and a home fleet of over 300 fresh warships. "They've been busy," Commander Jake Morrison said. He had brought the Valkyrie alongside Harper's ship for the final battle. Captain Ben Wright, the fleet's chief engineer, had been studying captured Vorthen technology for weeks. He was a quiet man who loved solving puzzles, and the Vorthen defenses were the biggest puzzle he had ever seen. "Admiral," Ben said over the communication system, "I think I found something. The Vorthens have adapted their shields to stop our kinetic weapons, but they're using a resonance frequency to coordinate everything." "What does that mean?" Harper asked. "It means if we can disrupt that frequency, their entire defense network will collapse," Ben explained. "But we need to get close enough to use our sonic mining equipment." Harper remembered the sonic drills the human miners used to break apart asteroids. They were powerful tools, but they had never been used as weapons before. How close? She asked. Very close, Ben admitted. Someone would have to get past all their defenses and reach the main shield generator. Lieutenant Commander Tim Jones was listening from his transport ship. Tim commanded a team of Marines who specialized in boarding enemy vessels. They were the toughest soldiers in the human fleet. I can do it, Tim said. Give me a captured Vorthan. Transport and my best people. We'll get your sonic equipment to the target. Harper looked at the tactical display again. The Vorthan defenses were incredibly strong, but they had one weakness. The enemy had focused everything on protecting their planet. They weren't expecting humans to sneak inside their own defense network. The plan was dangerous and probably suicidal, but it might work. All right, Harper said. But first, we need a distraction. Something big enough to draw their attention. Away from you. Commander Helen Ford commanded a squadron of destroyers. She was known for being aggressive in battle, sometimes too aggressive. But this time, her reckless style might save them all. I'll take my ships and hit their outer defenses, Helen said. Make as much noise as possible. Give Tim and his people a chance to get through. The battle began with Helen's destroyers charging straight at the Vorthan defense platforms. The enemy weapons opened fire immediately, filling space with deadly energy beams. 2 human ships were destroyed in the first few minutes, but Helen kept attacking. While the Vorthans were distracted by the frontal assault, Tim Jones and his Marines approached in their stolen transport. They had painted Vorthan symbols on the hull and were broadcasting false identification codes. This is Transport 7 returning with prisoners, Tim said in the Vorthan language. He had learned it by studying captured soldiers. The Vorthan traffic controller believed the lie. Transport 7, you are cleared to dock at Defense Platform Alpha. Tim's team landed on the platform and immediately began fighting their way to the shield generator. The Marines were wearing their best armor and carrying the most advanced weapons humanity had ever made. Sergeant Major Kelly Baker led the assault team through the station corridors. Kelly was small but incredibly tough, and she had been fighting in space for 15 years. She kicked down doors and shot Vorthan soldiers with deadly accuracy. Move, 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 Kelly shouted as her team advanced. We've got company behind us. The Vorthans had realized they had been tricked. Alarms were ringing throughout the station, and enemy soldiers were rushing to stop the human Marines. Tim and his technical team reached the shield generator room to find something that made their blood freeze. The Vorthans weren't just defending their homeworld. They were preparing to launch biological weapons that would kill every non-Vorthan species in the galaxy. Admiral, Tim said over his radio, you need to see this. The images he sent back showed laboratories full of deadly viruses and bacteria. The Vorthans had been working on these weapons for years, designing them to target the biology of specific alien species. If these weapons were released, billions of innocent beings would die. Harper stared at the images in horror. The Vorthan homeworld contained billions of civilians, including children who had never hurt anyone. But those same civilians would die. Anyway, if the biological weapons were deployed. How long until they can launch? Harper asked. Maybe an hour, Tim replied. They're loading the weapons onto missiles as we speak. Harper faced the hardest decision of her life. She could save the Vorthan civilians and let the biological weapons destroy hundreds of other worlds. Or she could stop the weapons and destroy an entire planet. The mathematics were terrible but simple. Sacrifice one world to save hundreds of others. Tim, plant the sonic charges and get out of there, Harper ordered. All ships, prepare for planetary bombardment. Captain Dan Miller commanded the heavy cruiser Retribution. His ship had been modified to carry humanity's most powerful weapon, a planet-killer warhead originally designed to destroy asteroids that threatened Earth. Admiral, I volunteer to deliver the final strike, Dan said. His voice was steady, but everyone knew this was a suicide mission. Dan ... double quotes Harper started to say. It has to be done, Dan interrupted. These people have chosen to be monsters. They've decided that genocide is acceptable. We can't let them spread their poison to the rest of the galaxy. Harper nodded slowly. She had known Dan for 10 years, and he was one of the bravest men she had ever met. Tim's team successfully planted the sonic charges and fought their way back to their transport. As they escaped, the charges detonated and sent resonance waves through the Vorthan defense network. The energy shields protecting the planet flickered and died. The defense platforms lost power and stopped firing. The entire fortress network collapsed in minutes. Dan Miller guided the Retribution through the failing defenses. Enemy ships tried to stop him, but his crew fought back with everything they had. The ship's hull was torn apart by enemy fire, but Dan held his course. This is for the Nalari, Dan said over the fleet communication channel. For all the species that can't fight back, for everyone who believed in justice. The planet-killer warhead detonated deep in the Vorthan homeworld's core. The explosion was so powerful it cracked the planet like an egg. Within minutes, the homeworld of the species that had terrorized the galaxy was gone. Harper watched the destruction on her screens. She felt no joy, only a terrible sadness. Billions of beings had just died, and she had given the order that killed them. But she also knew that billions more would live because of this decision. The biological weapons were destroyed along with the planet. The galaxy was safe from the Vorthan threat. All ships, Harper said quietly, the war is over. Begin rescue operations for any survivors. There were very few survivors. The Vorthan Empire had gambled everything on their homeworld defenses, and they had lost everything. The galaxy fell silent as news of the planet's destruction spread. Some species were horrified by humanity's actions. Others were grateful that the Vorthan threat was finally ended. Harper didn't care what others thought. She had made the hardest decision possible, and she would live with the consequences for the rest of her life. The human fleet began the long journey home, carrying the knowledge that they had prevented a genocide by committing one. It was a terrible burden, but someone had to bear it. In the empty space where the Vorthan homeworld once existed, only debris remained. The species that had thought they were superior to all others had learned the ultimate lesson about the consequences of evil. 6 months after the destruction of the Vorthan homeworld, Admiral Harper stood before the Galactic Council. The great chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of species, all watching the human who had changed the galaxy forever. Charges against her were serious: genocide, war crimes, and violation of galactic law. The trial was being broadcast across known space, and everyone wanted to see how the galaxy would judge humanity's actions. Ambassador Carl Stone represented Earth at the trial. He was an older man with white hair and calm eyes. Carl had been a diplomat for 30 years, and he had never faced a challenge like this one. The evidence is clear, said Counselor Vreck, the prosecutor. He was a tall, thin alien with silver skin and no emotion in his voice. The humans destroyed an entire world with billions of innocent civilians. This is the worst crime in galactic history. Carl stood up to defend humanity. He had prepared for this moment for months, studying every law and precedent in galactic legal history. Counselor Vreck speaks of innocence, Carl said. But what innocence exists in a society that creates biological weapons designed to commit genocide against all other species? Carl presented the evidence that Tim Jones and his Marines had found on the Vorthan defense platform. The images of the biological weapons laboratories filled the screens around the chamber. Many council members looked sick as they saw the extent of the Vorthan plans. The Vorthans were not preparing to defend their homeworld, Carl continued. They were preparing to murder every non-Vorthan life form in the galaxy. Every child, every parent, every innocent being on thousands of worlds would have died if we had not acted. But Counselor Vrek was not convinced. That does not justify destroying an entire planet. There must have been another way. Carl shook his head. There was no time for another way. The biological weapons were being loaded onto missiles. In 1 hour, they would have been launched. How many billions of lives was that planet worth? The debate continued for days. Some council members supported the humans, saying they had saved the galaxy from disaster. Others were horrified by the destruction of an entire world. Admiral Harper was allowed to speak on her own behalf. She walked to the center of the chamber and looked at the hundreds of alien faces staring at her. "I do not claim to be a hero," Harper said. "I am simply a soldier who refused to stand by while innocent people were murdered. If that makes me a monster in your eyes, then I accept that judgment." Harper's voice grew stronger as she continued. "But I want you to remember something. When the Nalari sent their desperate message asking for help, only one species answered. Only humans were willing to risk everything to save people they had never met." The chamber was silent as Harper finished her speech. "We are not perfect. We have made terrible mistakes in our history, but we have learned from those mistakes. We have sworn that genocide will never happen again while we have the power to stop it." The council deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, Counselor Z, the chief judge, announced their decision. The council finds that while the human actions were extreme, the threat posed by the Vorthan biological weapons was too great to ignore. No formal punishment will be imposed, but humanity will face economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation for 10 years. Carl Stone nodded. It was better than he had hoped for. The galaxy was telling humanity that they had done the right thing, even if they had done it in the wrong way. But the real judgment came from the survivors. Captain Nina Ross now commanded the memorial station built where the Vorthan homeworld once existed. Every day, ships arrived carrying visitors from across the galaxy. They came to honor the dead and to thank the humans who had saved them. The Nalari were humanity's strongest supporters. Counselor Zara Neal, one of the few Nalari leaders who had survived the war, established joint research facilities with human scientists. She had seen what the Vorthans did to her people, and she understood why the humans had acted. "You saved us when no one else would," Zara told Nia during one of her visits. "We will never forget that." Commander Greg Taylor was in charge of rebuilding the former Vorthan territories. He had expected the liberated worlds to seek revenge or try to conquer each other. Instead, something amazing happened. The former Vorthan colonies were building a new confederation based on mutual protection and cooperation. They called it the Liberation Alliance, and they asked humans to help lead it. "We have seen what happens when one species thinks it is superior to all others," said President Klix of the former Vorthan colony of Zarian. "We will never let that happen again." The Liberation Alliance became a powerful force for good in the galaxy. They established laws against genocide, created rapid response fleets to help species in danger, and built schools to teach tolerance and cooperation. Years passed, and new threats emerged from the unknown regions of space. But when the call for help came, it didn't go to the Galactic Council. It went directly to Admiral Harper and the Combined Defense Fleet. Harper was older now, with more gray in her hair and lines around her eyes. But she was still the same person who had answered the Nalari distress call years before. Lieutenant Commander John Hayes was her new aide. He was young and eager, like Harper had been when she first went to space. "Admiral," John said, "we're receiving reports of attacks on civilian colonies in the Omega Sector. The attackers are using weapons we've never seen before." Harper looked at the intelligence reports. Another species of predators had decided that innocent people were easy targets. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Prepare the fleet," Harper ordered. "Send a message to all our allies. Tell them the combined defense fleet is mobilizing." "Should we wait for council approval?" John asked. Harper smiled, and it was the same hard smile she had worn when facing the Vorthens. "The galaxy has learned one lesson. Predators who hunt the innocent will answer to humanity and our allies. We don't need permission to do what's right." Within hours, ships from dozens of species were joining the human fleet. Nalari science vessels brought advanced sensors. Former Vorthen colonies sent their fastest fighters. Even some species that had criticized humanity's actions in the past sent support ships. The combined defense fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't just human ships anymore. It was an alliance of every species that believed in protecting the innocent Dot as the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace. Harper received a message from Earth. It was from her old friend, Admiral Chun, who now commanded the home fleet. "Lisa," Chun said, "the whole galaxy is watching. They're calling you the guardian of the innocent. No pressure." Harper laughed for the first time in weeks. "Tell Earth not to worry. We're just going to have a conversation with some bullies. They'll understand our point of view." The combined defense fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying the message that humanity had given to the galaxy. Evil would be answered with justice, and the innocent would never stand alone while humans drew breath. On the memorial station orbiting where Vorthen once stood, a simple message was carved into the metal hull. "Never again. Not on our watch. Not while we draw breath." Visitors from across the galaxy read those words and understood their meaning. Humanity had become the galaxy's conscience, the species that would pay any price to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The predators of the universe had learned to fear a simple sound, the engines of human ships coming to deliver justice. And in the deep darkness of space, that sound meant hope for anyone who was in trouble. Commander Jake Morrison, now an old man, still served on the Valkyrie. He often stood on the bridge and remembered the day they first heard the Nalari. A stress call. That single message had changed everything. Did we do the right thing? Young officers sometimes asked him. Jake would point to the stars, where human and alien ships patrolled together, protecting trade routes and responding to emergencies. "Look out there," he would say. "See how many species work together now. See how many worlds sleep safely because they know someone is watching." That's our answer. The galaxy was a different place now. It was not perfect. There was still conflict and suffering. But it was a place where the strong protected the weak, where genocide was met with swift justice, and where the cry for help was always answered. Humanity had kept its promise. They had made sure that what happened to the Nalari would never happen again. The Deathworlders from Earth had brought their own special gift to the galaxy, the knowledge that someone would always fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And in the memorial hall of the station where Vorthen once stood, children from dozens of species learned the story of the humans who came when nobody else would. They learned that heroes were not perfect beings, but ordinary people who chose to do what was right when it mattered most. The galaxy remembered, and the galaxy was grateful. Admiral Harper retired eventually, but the combined defense fleet continued her work. New generations of humans and aliens served together, bound by the same promise that had brought them together, to protect the innocent and stand against evil, no matter the cost. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, filled with the light of cooperation and hope. And somewhere in the darkness, predators looked at those lights and chose easier targets, because they knew that humanity and its allies were watching.